right, welcome to Proof Beyond Reason, our first episode.
Number one.
The first ever episode. I am Ivan the Average. I got with me Mike the Baptist and Geology. Let's give a shout out real quick to our sponsors, MatthewMovement.com. Make sure you guys check them out. Wear What You Believe, hip-hop clothing, mixed with the culture, mixed with a little bit of Christianity and a whole lot of Jesus. And today we're going to be talking about, what are we talking about? The culture. The culture. Today we're going to be talking about today, basically.
Yeah.
What's going on today.
What it is, yeah.
That's going to be our first episode. While you guys are hearing us, just make sure you guys take note that if you want to give a comment, if you want to leave anything, you guys can hit us up at proofbeyondreason@gmail.com.
That's it.
proofbeyondreason@gmail.com. Because it's our first episode, we don't have every single one of our personal
social media outlets.
Media outlets out there. But in the future episodes, we should be able to give everybody.
Well, you could find me at Mike the Baptist on Twitter.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about the culture today. So just to jump right into this, I mean, today, I think there was already like 2 shootings today.
Word?
I mean, at least was it today or was it yesterday? Pine Hills.
Yes. Another one in Pine Hills.
Another
today?
one, and then the Facebook killer, I think is what they were calling him, which everybody should know that.
Cleveland.
That was just shooting somebody. He just walked out of his car and just shot somebody. Did you see that, Mike?
No.
You haven't seen that?
Nope.
Guy literally walked out of his car on Facebook Live. I mean, this is the world we're in. Listen to this. Facebook Live. So nobody would have been able to do this before. Walks out of his car. I guess he broke up with his girlfriend. I don't know all of the information, but broke up with his girlfriend and literally got out of his car and looked at a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, and say, "Oh yeah, that guy, I'll just kill him." Walked right up to him, pointed the camera and said, "Hey, do you know this woman?" Said her name. Guy looked at him and was like, "Nah." And he said, "Well, this is the reason you're going to die." Bam. Took out pistol in the head.
Is that
Camera
real?
shook.
That's not real.
It was real.
G. Is that real?
G.
That was said to have happened.
It was real. Then he got, was it yesterday too that they found that the cops circled him and then he killed himself? So before they could get him, he said he killed 13 people already. We're talking about 13 random people.
Nah.
I'm telling
I'm looking
you.
it up right now. These cats giving me fake news.
No. I'm telling you. That was, if you see the video's real. Like, they had searches on Facebook and everything. But again, this is the world we're living in today, right now. I mean, killings left and right. Do you see it?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. ABC News.
Yeah.
And, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it really happened. I mean, so we're looking at this postmodern, this world where we're really entrapped by our social media right now. More people are looking down at their phones than they're looking into books than ever before. More people are looking down at their phones than they are looking really at television screens or even at the real world. People interact with people on their phones.
I mean,
if they're right next to each other.
It's like I always say, they connect or they want to connect, but they're slowly disconnecting from people in itself.
There is a disconnect there.
It's a weird, almost. It's like a reverse evolutionary process. You know, for those that believe in evolution, there's this sense that we're getting bigger, faster, stronger, more intelligent, but we're losing the basic elements of life, morality, community interaction, face-to-face interaction, like some basic skills that you need. Eye contact, just basic things.
Yeah,
we just lose that.
People don't know how to, or most people don't know how to give an interview. How to do an interview.
It depends your age too.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is coming up with millennials. When it comes to millennials in our generation, a lot of that is,
which I think all of us are millennials at this table.
So here's some facts real quick for you on when we're talking about that, jumping into some millennials, right? We got on average right now, approximately 10,000 millennials are born, or 10,000 millennials are turning 21 every day. So what that goes into,
I'm much
is
older
that,
than that, by
right?
the way. Just
Is that as the baby
I'm the oldest one here, so just
that we're going to actually be the biggest generation come to 2018.
Well, as of the end of last year, to my understanding, we are the number one generation as of the end of last year.
Wow.
Pew Research
Yeah.
showed that we are the largest generation right now.
Yeah, Bazaar says that in 2018, millennials will have the most spending power of any generation ever.
I believe that.
They eclipse the baby boomers by 3.39 trillion.
That's crazy.
Oracle says that. And if Oracle says it, you have to believe that. I don't care what you are. If your company's name is Oracle, that's a top 500 company. But the name alone. So just on commerce alone, it says that 41% of millennials, we're talking about millennials, so they can be young, old, all of that, wherever we're at in that millennial cap, 41% have already made purchases on their smartphones or gone to a website or something like that. 48% of millennials say word of mouth means more than any ad or any show or any sort of advertisement or marketing that you can do. That word of mouth. And you see that in our culture. You see it. I mean, I think it's because of like what you were saying, G, that right now our culture is so open and our tentacles, like we can reach everybody right now, but we're so closed to the person, to the people even next to us.
Yeah.
I got my lady that tells me all the time when we're having a conversation, she has to literally tell me to put my phone down. Like, and this is a rule we made up, like in our house, like, don't be disrespectful to each other. Try not to be disrespectful to people as well when they're talking to you. Something I would like to teach my kids coming up. I mean, it's disrespectful. And we're so connected. I'm connected to everybody right now. All my family in Cuba, all my family in Miami, New Jersey.
Shout out to Cuba.
Shout out to all of the Cubanos, the Cubans.
Hey.
Yeah, all my family in Puerto Rico too.
Puerto Rico.
Got
Come
a
on
little
now.
bit of Puerto Rican in me. And now with my wife, our family in Guyana, and in our family in
Ooh.
Ireland.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Shout out to Connor.
McGregor. That's it. So I mean, what is that doing to us?
You know, it's interesting because I've had this conversation with younger millennials. I'm of the older millennial group, but from the younger millennials, I've had almost arguments or heated debates. Not something that's damaging, but in the workplace, in the corporate work environment, there's a lot of issues, quote unquote, issues with millennials, and I think overall. I think when we look at the behaviors of this generation, I think it's a good thing. Like, and let me preface it by saying this. I think it's the communication piece, being hooked to the phones, and I think every generation had a vice. The baby boomer generation had vices with cigarettes. This generation doesn't necessarily have the vice with cigarettes. They have vices with electronic devices and being kind of ahead of the game with shoes and all of that, because there's so much information. We're exposed to so many things. I mean, you started the show talking about, there was a murder here, there's a murder there, and we just constantly are getting bombarded with all of this information about things that are happening around the world. But when I was growing up, we didn't have that much information. Now, I mean, I can watch somebody get their head chopped off on YouTube or whatever it is if I find it, fast enough. And we're almost desensitized to pain or empathy because we see so much of it, with the access of so much information.
That's big.
That that we've become this generation that, even though we may be fighting for rights and we want there to be this sense of equal acceptance and all this, all this relatively good things because there's so much information out there. People can compare and challenge worldviews and challenge thoughts and challenge ideas. And that's all positive. I think that's all positive and progressive. I think that's amazing. But the downside to it is the lack of empathy and the lack of independent thinking. Mm-hmm. I think we are getting so fed, and this is my opinion, so you can feel free to disagree. But I think we want to be heard so much through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, through whatever you use, Snapchat. Some of the younger millennials are using all this stuff now. But I think we want to be heard so bad, but it's very difficult to have a conversation, to have a sit down, let's talk, let's have a positive conflict around certain issues where we can iron out what our differences are and what the issues are so that we can really progress. There's like talk about progressiveness, but the actual act of being progressive has to do with rational ideas, people just sitting down and being rational and talking about things in a very, we can have conflict and we can argue, but it can be a positive thing for positive change. I think we're missing that because we're so consumed with wanting to be heard. We're not listening to each other.
I think that's a big plague right now, because I can have a conversation with somebody, but it's never really a conversation if we're both not looking in the same direction. So if I have my own point of view and somebody else has a different point of view, no one's listening. It's like we're both having an argument every time. And it's not an argument as far as what we used to call an argument back in the day, where two people are really giving what they have and we're open to listening. Like you're saying, we've become almost like, this is my belief and that's it. I'm holding on to it. But where did you get that belief? Where did it stem from? And you end up finding out that it really is just somebody else's belief that you ended up hearing word of mouth wise, because you didn't have anything there. There was a chasm there. There was a hole there. So then you took to whatever you felt at that moment was the one that you read up, and not much research. And here's what's crazy. So you would think that because our generation is so desensitized, right? And you see them at the workplace.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, you see them at the workplace, right? But you would almost think like, man, these people, how dumb could they be? If you really watch videos of us and how we act and how our generation is on the television screen, and you see these riots and you see how we really are trying to show our voice, and you would think like, man, these people, they're so like, how could they do that? But we are actually, here's a statistic from Millennial Branding, is that 50% of millennials are college students that have gone into the classroom, and 63% of millennials have actually gotten their bachelor's degree. So at some point in time, millennials are the most educated generation in America, is what it says. The most educated. So you have these two things that it's like, man, we're so educated, right? We have everything at our fingertips. But yet we don't know how to act.
I think
it's things mostly that affect them. That's what they lean towards. Like a matter of, does it suit me in a way? That's how it's gone or been twisted. So you have people getting all this information, all this knowledge, education, quote unquote, and then it just all merges together and they just pick and choose whatever suits them. That's what a common thing that's been happening lately.
Yeah, I think the reaction is it could be due to, we have so many outlets for people, for our voice to be heard, but we're not really being heard. And we really want to be heard because we have all this information in our head. We have all this knowledge, and it's easy for us to look up something in Google and think that it's the most accurate information in the world because that's the first result that came up, or that's the sponsored result, and that's the one that we're getting first. So we think it's, this is it. This is correct information. It might not be correct information. It might be distorted. But in any case, I think I mean, there's a lot of positive that comes from having so much knowledge. Again, challenging ideas, challenging philosophies, and I even love the fact that that the church is being challenged so much as far as church structure, as far as the word. I think it's phenomenal because it instead of us shying away from it and being scared and like, oh man, the challenging word of God in church, I think it's a very positive thing because it forces the Christian community to rise up and be knowledgeable and stop playing games and stop, if there are churches out there that are messing with people and stealing from people, the millennial generation is out to get you. Yeah. They're gonna find the horse crap in your system and they're gonna get it and it's gonna stink. And
you gotta make sure it stinks.
They're gonna make sure that it's exposed, and I think that's phenomenal.
I love the fact that this generation also on that same conversation of challenging the church, I haven't seen a more acceptance in churches than I have right now. Now that can go to
that can be a bad
thing.
Absolutely.
Anything at its hyper and at its extreme can be bad.
We can have heresy jump in the church. Absolutely.
All of that. But as far as what I've seen myself in my own walk, I have seen an abundance of just openness. Just even by, I mean, if you think about it, in some of our walks, you can't even by just how you look, you couldn't walk into or be accepted into a place.
If you had a hat on.
Yeah.
And, I remember when.
Tattoos.
Yeah, I remember, man, this was a long time ago, but I remember, having G at a service one time and
Geology.
just seeing G and his crew in the back just drawing with their hats on, hoodies, and just kind of chilling. And immediately the thought process from a very legalistic standpoint was like, oh, these cats ain't paying attention. Yeah. They're not this, they're not that. And when I approached them with that legalistic mindset and I just show up to them, not only were these cats paying attention, but they could summarize what the word was saying. They were on it.
And they drew a picture.
They showed you what was being preached. And I was like, these dudes is legit. And, we just formed an amazing relationship from there. But that is a prime example of how distorted maybe our view is of what we call, the millennial generation, the younger generation. And a lot of the distorted views of the millennial generation come from the older generation. Yeah. And when our parents,
that's where it stems from.
When our parents were young, with the baby boomer generation, their parents thought they were crazy and these guys were doing all these wrong things. So it's a cycle. It's not something new. This is not a new thing. But the fact that our generation is the most technologically advanced, most educated, that's, I think, the point of discussion here today is kind of how the culture has been affected, whether positive or negative, by this assuming information at your fingertips, with all the social media and everything that's kind of bombarded us in the last few years, literally last maybe 7-8 years, just so fast.
Yeah, 2007 maybe and on.
Yeah,
I mean 2001 and on.
I think there's an ebb and flow, kind of this tug of war between these two words, and hear me out. I think there's this tug of war right now in our culture between battling for acceptance and tolerance.
That's
both of those things are having this tug of war. Do you accept me? If you don't, then where's your tolerance at? And do you tolerate me? Because if you tolerate me, then you can accept me. And there's like this ebb and flow, this movement right now of tolerance and acceptance.
But there's no way that I'm wrong though. So don't get it twisted, right? So that's kind of part of that. Yep. Is either you accept me.
You have to accept me. Or you have to tolerate.
There's no way that I'm wrong. My behavior is not wrong.
Exactly.
It's me. I'm doing me, and I'm gonna invent a new reason why I exist or why I do things. So you have to accept me. And if you don't accept me, I'm gonna find a group in North Dakota. If you live in like Orlando, right? If none of you guys accept me, there's gonna be a group somewhere in the United States or in the world that I can jump onto even if they're not face to face, even if they're just on my device.
We're seeing that a lot in the LGBT community. I mean, nowadays you'll have people just automatically go, "Oh, I'm gay," and if you don't accept that, they'll just keep going and they'll just be doing themselves until they find a way, or they have other people come with them, and they basically just form new laws or change government structure so that it can fit their.
Yeah.
And that's just one group, though. That's just one example of many. I think as far as our culture is concerned, that's just the norm. The norm now is to form groups with titles and logos and T-shirts and all that stuff.
If there isn't a group made for me, I'm making my own group, and then people are following me. This is the norm right now, and this is the most. I don't know. Maybe since Roman times, from what I read in Roman. In historical writings of that time, of that era, this has to be one of the most times that the worldview of relativism is just
popping,
just embedded in every worldview. I mean, like, it is like this like.
Repeat that, yeah. So wait, relativism embedded in every worldview. Dang, that's a bold statement right there.
In every worldview, you could see relativism in Christianity when you have things that are clearly apostate, when you have things that's clearly heresy, and it ebb and flows on the acceptance tolerance thing. But it's like, no, I have relativism in my worldview. Not that my worldview is relativism, but I think now more than ever, relativism is in everyone's worldview.
I think, when we look at the science community is pushing this. I mean, for years they have been, pushing this idea that religion and science are separate. When in fact I think that's a completely distorted message
since the 1800s.
Yeah, it's a completely distorted message and a completely distorted way to try to create essentially like their own worldview. But that's we could even jump into that topic later. But the relativistic part comes almost from the scientific community in that I was listening to another podcast, and a leading physicist was on there talking about how there's just so many possibilities with physics and this and that. Even though there are laws in place, they're starting to see how there's just so many possibilities with certain things, and mathematics can give you infinite conclusions or infinite possibilities. Blah 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 blah. And then suddenly he just throws in this statement out of nowhere. Yeah. Unlike the greatest story ever told, it's only once and that's it, and that's a boring story. And just out of nowhere, just gives this just wrecking ball to Christianity and Jesus. And later on in the podcast, he continued to just bash Christianity and Jesus when his topic of discussion didn't have to do with historical relevance, nor did it have to do with philosophy. It had to do with a science, and science doesn't eliminate or doesn't disprove the existence of God, nor does it disprove, maybe it depends on the religion, obviously, but it doesn't necessarily disprove that religion, or it doesn't prove that religion is a hindrance on society or anything like that. They just kind of throw these assertive statements in there.
It actually does the opposite. It actually reveals.
Yeah, it tells
in
more
many ways,
of a story.
I mean, science shows you that there's order, that there's infinite amount of information. There's creativity. There's so much that points us to a designer that. I mean, we can dive deep into that discussion at a later time too. But there's so much that is revealed through science that it doesn't take away from a designer. Actually, affirms the designer. But these assertive statements is what I'm getting at. Is that the assertive statements in that there's no way there can be an absolute truth or an absolute reality or an absolute view of the world. There has to be relativism, and I think that kind of goes back to us as a society. We're seeing there's so much information and so many possibilities and so many things that we get influenced in that.
But what do you believe? How do you believe what you believe? If it's being questioned every day, if not only, I think all of our views are being questioned just because another view is being shown to you every single day because of this intake of information that we now have in our culture. So we kind of have all of these people that are really like Christ was saying, this wave that's being tossed left and right, just back and forth, not really knowing or being grounded or having this full foundation of what they believe. I remember going out to one of the cities here and talking with millennials and just bringing them 4 pictures, having 4 pictures out there. And before I started our conversation with my 4 pictures, I would ask them what they believed. And I'm telling you, Mike, there was no one knew what they believed. I mean, it was alarming. Nobody knew what they believed. We're talking about 15-year-old, 17-year-old educated people, educated kids, young adults that don't know what they believe. So then I come at them with this very scientific, very, very fundamental, almost this algorithm of acceptance and understanding who Christ is and understanding how science really reveals Christ. And man, you can see them battling, like in their face, in their mind.
There's no way that's the truth. There's no way.
But then you leave the question there, and you just leave it there, and it just plant the seed, and tell them, like, would you research this? Like, would you look this up? Would you go and just take it home with you and just really think about this thing? And you can really see that it's there. There's a point in our culture where, yes, they hold on to what they believe, which they don't know. Most of us don't know what we really believe, but there is that threshold where I think that's really why we're here, kind of PBR altogether, that we can reach a society.
Just to clarify, we are in the Christian worldview, all 3 of us here.
If you don't know already, or if you haven't realized that, yes.
But G, you are in forums, and sometimes you're doing back and forth, and I know you get very common themes or very common rebuttals and common, it's almost like there's a lack of individual thought to certain topics because we're just getting fed certain things from the Facebook or the news. Even we're getting Ivan's over here, he's giving you information of the news, and all of a sudden that's legit, and sometimes we have to do a little more research to make sure we have all the facts and stuff, but that's true, right? When you're on the forums, that you kind of see this consistent, just same thoughts, and it's almost like cookie cutter ideas or things that you heard, but not necessarily something you've wrestled with. You've sat back, you've thought about it, you try to put things together, you try to create a reason behind why you're thinking about this, but no, instead it's like a parrot just repeating things.
I mean, a common thing I constantly hear is Jesus wasn't real. It's all a myth. When I start pointing out even non-biblical accounts of his existence, people start baffling and just like start stuttering, wondering where I got this information. And you could talk about Pliny the Young and Tiberius, and people just start going crazy.
Or even the disciples themselves, that there's countless historical evidence and
even
outside of the Bible.
Their disciples.
Scripture itself has been told being historically accurate.
Not circular reasoning. Again, not using Scripture to prove Scripture, but saying we're going to look outside of this book for some sort of proof in the tapestry of history and see if there is anything that's pointing to any of these events. Because really, if there's 1 or 2 things pointing to these events, there is some sort of trueness here. There's some sort of pureness in what this book is saying. I like it.
No, yeah, and when we talk about how the millennial generation's kind of this, and I don't want to keep bashing millennial generation.
Don't
You know
do
what I'm
it.
saying? Like that's
We're
not. It's not what I
millennials.
want to do. One, I'm a millennial, right? But you know, one of the things that I don't enjoy is being in that corporate environment where there's all this, you know, human resource training on how to keep millennials based on the behavior, blah 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 blah. And I think you know, millennials to some degree are misunderstood.
Does it get you though?
But you know, there's a lot of truth in it. Don't get me wrong. But you know, I think just as quickly as we can see that the culture's just been bombarded by the information, we ourselves have been bombarded with the information. So, you know, our sleep patterns are different. The way as you mentioned, the way we interact with each other, different. Our health is different.
That's 89% of millennials would prefer to choose when and where they work rather than being at a 9 to 5. All that has to do with what you're saying, Mike.
Which
is
amazing, though. If you think about that, it's amazing because we don't want. Because I know I'm probably part of that statistic.
Yeah,
we don't want to be at a 9 to 5, 8 to 5 behind a desk.
It doesn't work with our lives, with how our pattern is.
Well, not only that, because we have the exposure to to YouTube, and we see these YouTubers and these vloggers, and
There's
maybe
so many avenues
and maybe G one day that's his thing. He's gonna be this vlogger, and people gonna be following him. That's gonna be so awesome. Follow G, but
geology.
You know, geology, but. You know, we see these people having these lifestyles that are just extraordinary. They travel the world and they're doing all these things and they're filming it. And we're like, wow, I want that life. And my life sucks in comparison to that person. And we're suddenly comparing ourselves with other people. And the interesting thing about that is when you have that situation going on, sometimes you don't realize how much work it took to get to that position.
No.
We want it handed to us. We want
the microwave. We're the microwave generation. We are the push the button generation, and it's supposed to go. How fast can my phone process 4 things? At first, it was one thing. Now it's how quick can I do split screen and still be able to do all the things that I did. My laundry can't get done faster. Like, all of these things have to get done, and that is a plague also in our generation. So we know all this stuff, but yet we almost are spoiled in our bringing up, and we're going to be spoiling without even knowing our children in the generations to come.
I mean, I don't have too much gripe about the productivity aspect of utilizing the technology. No. My gripe is the downtime. Yeah. It's the downtime that's destructive. It's the downtime where we can spend 4 hours.
Well, you
on
know
YouTube.
what you want in downtime. I want my Netflix. You know what I'm saying? I want my binge of Netflix, and I need that extra washer because it'll give me 5 extra minutes. I need the microwave.
Not promoting
service.
Netflix and chill. This is not promoting
Uber,
Netflix and chill.
Yeah, not promoting it. But Uber just is coming out with now. They're pushing a delivery service for food.
I mean, they have that already.
It's there. It's there. I'm saying they're now pushing
that before.
Marketable. It's going out now.
They have campaigns used that for the pizza, my brother.
Exactly.
Like, you went to go pick up the pizza.
I did it old school. You know what I'm saying? I'm an old school millennial.
And I'm the new school in the sense that I'm going to heat up that pizza in the microwave, my brother, because I want the 30 seconds and just throw it in. But
I just eat it while it's hot. But like you're saying, there is a plague. I've seen a statistic before that was saying that they'll even our generation will be flexible, will lose pay if you're flexible on hours. So now we're giving things up. We're saying, you know what? I'll take that $8.25.
I mean, I believe
if you let me just make
life. I want to live.
I
mean, I hated to see my parents.
I see that a lot in the retail life as a manager. Exactly. I used to work in one of those bigger retail stores, and literally we can give them 5 hours and they would not complain because
they were
all they
good. How are your call-ins?
Call-ins are crazy.
Yeah. Listen, me and G have worked in this retail life. Mike, you worked in retail yet?
Long
time ago.
Like
so
it's 15 years.
So
it's been too
as
long.
a store manager, man, one of the hardest things to do when I was creating, and I'm sure G, you're with me on this, when we're creating this schedule, and all you have are millennials, because again, they will take the lower pay. So we're using that. They'll take this lower pay for these flexible hours. Is call-ins. You got to be able to schedule people that you could just pick up the phone and say, hey, I need you to come in. The shift is kind of a gray shift. You don't know whether you are coming in. It's not a permanent shift. It's a call-in. You got to call me, and I'll tell you whether you're coming in or not. I need that because if business happens to get booming throughout that hour or the 5 hours, whatever it be, I need to have extra support. It is the hardest thing to get somebody to come in for their call-ins in this millennial world. I mean, the hardest. It's literally they are begging on the phone,
and they rather give their shit to someone else.
Not to come in. They're like, you're telling me, hold on, I'll call you right back. I'm going to call 5 or 10 people, somebody that needs the hours. And they will call you back, and somebody else will walk through that door.
You know, you can't blame them trying to maximize that life, the childlike life. You know what I'm saying? Like, looking at your parents, and you seeing your parents work all these crazy hours, and then as we grow up, we're working all these crazy hours. Like it's kind of crazy to grow up and see your parents and not be able to have that relationship time with them. But our generation, we lived at home for a long time. We were under mom's umbrella, mama's house, grandma's house for a very long time. And so that's another difference right there, is that there wasn't necessarily an immediate need to be independent. There was more so the need to just help out. But, we weren't necessarily looking to a sustainable future. Why? Because of that education stat that you just read. All these cats are in college and, maybe getting loans or whatever in school. And so the concentration was school, and that was the selling point. And, man, I can go on a tangent about that, but I'm not going to go on a tangent on it. But, I think part of what I was going to get back to was part of the lack of independent thinking. It is when we look at like our society as a whole, what we're hearing a lot more and more, and even probably in the forums and when you hear online and the other podcasts that I listen to, this idea of just taking the statement religion and just throwing that label on anything that has to do with worshiping a deity or anything, and they just all get thrown in the bucket, and they're all seen as primitive, and we need to throw it all in the garbage.
There's definitely a stank behind that word now.
Yeah, and immediately. So when you're on this, when as soon as you get mentioned that you're religious or you pertain to a religion, religious affiliation, suddenly you're labeled as illogical, you're unuseful, you live in a fantasy, you're primitive. You start there's all these distorted words, but they're not. There's no substance to it. It's just assertive statements
because they heard it.
They've heard it, so and it's even coming from people with a bunch of letters at the end of their name, PhD, whatever.
You have to hear that.
Yeah, and but suddenly they're throwing it at you.
Now you guys might hate me for this. You might not like what I'm about to say, but I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at them for the reason of this, that what happened to us in post-Christianity? Like, what happened to Christianity? What happened to our voice? We're saying that all of these different religions, all of these different points of views, all of these different worldviews are infiltrating our lives, right? Just over and over again. But what happened to the Christian really bringing his faith up front and being face to face with that, passing the faith forward? What happened to that? I mean, that's why I'm not mad at it, because it's not there, G. It's not. I don't see it as much as I would say I used to. Not only that, but I don't do it as much as I used to as well. So how can you be mad at the gentleman with the PhD if he's pushing his version of Christianity at that time? You know what I'm saying? Whatever it is that he believes in is his worldview, and he's pushing that. The same way us 10 years ago, we were a modern Christian society. I mean, you look at us 20 years ago, and I mean, we were Christian. Like, if you looked at the whole thing,
ideas and maybe some of the the political correctness could have been classified as coming from a biblical worldview, but I think it was I wouldn't call us a Christian society. I would say more so we gravitated to the biblical worldview aspect. Yeah, absolutely. But now it's blatantly a non-biblical type of generation that we live in, and so we're the problem that I see really is the lack of identifying religions as independent worldviews, like seeing them independently for what they are, and just instead of lumping them together, particularly Christianity, instead of looking beyond or see, one of the arguments is that there's been a lot of harm done in the name of Christ, or there's been a lot of hypocrisy and so on and so on. But that's not the essence of the worldview. If you study the worldview and you understand the worldview, it is quick to see that the harm that was done in the name of Christianity, it's not Christianity. So therefore, you can't label it as Christian, and it is not okay. It is not a proper representation of the Christian faith. So you have to bypass this lumping of religion and throwing everyone in the same bucket, and start to identify these religions as independent worldviews, and start to see, what are they bringing? What is what are they saying? What are they affirming? What is the historical relevance of this worldview? Is there any historical facts that pertain to this worldview? And then once you start to discover more and more about a worldview, then you can take it seriously. But if you have, when you have a bunch of fantasy, of course you're not. Of course we're gonna smell it and say, well, I'm not following that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm going to read a passage I read or picked up on an article. It states, history of Western culture has been influenced by Christian ethics and scientific reason, when ignored by common spiritual loyalties and discipline of an objective intellectual tradition, bred aggressive self-assertion, wars, and revolutions.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's a lot.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, he's going to have to read that 7
Read that one more time.
History of Western culture has been influenced by Christian ethics and scientific reason, when ignored by common spiritual loyalties and discipline of an objective intellectual tradition, bred aggressive self-assertion, wars, and revolutions.
Yeah. Right now, we're the aliens.
Yep.
Right now, this is a post-Christianity culture we're living in. We are the people that are not supposed to be here. We are the person that's walking down the street that people look at and say, oh, really? We're really not supposed to be here. And some of that problem also in wrapping this episode up is that instead of looking for Christ, we're looking for a government official, or we're looking for a Messiah here on earth in a person, in a David-like person that can come and can save our people somehow. And that's not happening. That's not going to happen. The Bible doesn't say that this is going to happen. If anything, in eschatology, it's the reverse. It's going to happen in a reverse form. There will be somebody that does take power, but it's not who we want to be taking power at that moment. And so that's where we're at right now. We are aliens. We are people that are not supposed to be here, and we're countercultural. We are the ones that are countercultural. And in that, this is the best time for you to be reading your word, because this is where Christ came, in a place and in a time and in an era that was countercultural. Christ himself was countercultural when he came through. If you look at some of the disciples and the ways that they reached areas, that they reached the lost, that they went into perverse places, and they themselves were counted out right off the bat because of what they believed in, what they were bringing. It was completely off the wall. Where Paul went, where there was absolutely nobody. There was a statue of literally nothing. And he's like, this is what you guys believe in. Like, you guys are believing in this? And that's what we're talking about today. This is the best time for us to open up your word, open up your Bible, look in Acts, look at what these men did, because just like some of these movements have started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a group of people, and now have thousands or even hundreds of thousands of followers, it's now time for us to go kind of in this pattern of Christianity is going to come back. This leaning of Christianity, this kind of force of Christianity will come back, and it's because of the selflessness, I believe, that the word teaches.
Well, throughout history, there's a trend, and W.E.H. Lecky, in his book, A History of England in the 18th Century, he alludes to this in his book, And I think it's very accurate when we look at all of history and even all the countries currently, when Christianity was seen as the taboo thing, it became the most attractive thing to people. And that's when you saw this exponential growth, because it was the faith that was being denounced. It was the faith that was being persecuted, and so it became taboo but very attractive to the people. So in years to come, because of all the chaos that was surrounding Christianity, it saw tremendous growth. And we see that even in the patterns today in Korea and China and India. As some of those countries were seeing more persecution, they're seeing a crazy growth in people claiming Christ. But the reverse would happen as well. In cultures where Christianity became the mainstream and Christianity became a distorted religion or distorted worldview, in that it was starting to conform to be for the benefit of the government, or it started to conform and started to get distorted from its pure form. Then you start to see a decline because people didn't trust in Christianity anymore. They didn't trust in the message because they saw so much foolery. They saw so much deception in the system itself, but it was too popular. So even today, we see the same thing in some of the worldviews, or even the groups that we see popping up, and all these crazy ideas that are arising that we'll probably touch on in the next episode. You're seeing that those that were once taboo are now seeing this huge growth and getting huge support. And the same pattern was seen with Christianity. So I think instead of the church shying away from this drop in attendance in churches, instead of being scared that the government's going to start to tax Christians and do all that, we should embrace this idea that trials and tribulations are going to come, because now we're going to start to see the purest form of Christianity. We're going to start to see the power of God manifest himself in the people, in the church, rather than it being part of the government or being just a worldview that is united with the government. Now we're going to start to see the purest form of Christianity, and the distortion, the hypocrisy, all the things that we were seeing, the false messages, the false gospels, are going to start to eliminate themselves. And that's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing, that in light of something that seems to be so disgusting and so so tragic, there's going to be beauty that comes with it, because we're going to see a surge in the true Christianity start to rise. So I think honestly we need to tune in. We just need to keep talking about this next week. So I think our next episode, we're going to continue to talk about this topic, and really until we feel that we've covered pretty good ground on it. But next week you expect to hear some more of what we're talking about, and start to dive into different avenues of this topic. And if you have anything you want to chime in on, if you have a disagreement, or if you want to hear us talk about something more specific, hit us up on proofbeyondreason@gmail.com so we can get that in. We can read it, we can respond to you, and we're more than happy to do that. And that's it. That's our time for today. Stay tuned next week for the next episode. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, Matthew Movement. You can check out their website, MatthewMovement.com. Check out their shirts and all that good stuff. But for now, as Mike the Baptist signing out.
Geology.
Yes, sir.
Ivan the Savage had to go.
Ivan the Savage. Ivan the Average. This man does not, he doesn't have a stage name, so he's trying to think of a stage name. If you think of one for him, send us a message at proofbeyondreason@gmail.com. Send us some suggestions, but he's kind of in the middle. Savage, average. He doesn't know. He doesn't have an identity, but he understands that his identity is in Christ, and that's awesome. So we're out.
All right, keep tuned for our social media opening up: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Yes, sir.